Hi, this is Sergeant Betsy Brantner Smith with the National Police Association, and this is the National Police Association podcast. I have a guest today that I started following on social media because she had some pretty phenomenal things to say. She's from my home state of Illinois, and instead of fleeing it like I did, she's actually trying to save it. So I wanted to meet her, and I thought you needed to meet her too, because she has some great views about law enforcement, about the Second Amendment and citizens' rights. And I'm really thrilled to be able to talk to her. Christian Maxwell, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. This is amazing.
I know, I'm so excited to talk to you. So you live in my native state of Illinois. You live in Chicago,
I
and
do.
and you decided that you needed to really step in and step up, not only to try and save Chicago and affect what happens in Chicago, but also in the state of Illinois. And I don't know that a lot of people know intimately what Illinoisans go through and what they're dealing with, but it really is one of the most taxed, most restricted states in the union, and Chicago in particular has one of the highest crime rates in this nation.
Yes.
And so first of all, I got to ask you, what made you look in the mirror and say, I think I'll run for Congress?
So it was definitely nothing that I ever imagined myself doing. I'm not a person who sat in my room, amping myself up like, hey, I should be a congresswoman. I actually declined hundreds of people asking me to do it for a while on social media. And I told all of them, I'm like, you know what, guys, I'm actually probably a little bit too honest to do something of this nature. And I'm much too much of a straight shooter to ever, pander and kind of like tiptoe around inside of something like politics. But when I really had to come to terms with the fact that Illinois is the state that my family is rooted in, my husband's entire family lives here, and my family lives here. So this is the state that I will be residing in for the future, as far as I'm concerned. So sitting back and letting it rot just simply wasn't an answer. It wasn't a solution anymore. So I had to decide, was I going to just sit back and hope somebody else stepped to the plate to empower and improve things, or was I going to be a part of change? One thing I tell people all the time now, though, is that even if I don't win this election, I'm not going to stop advocating. I'm not going to stop holding these people accountable and raising awareness about the perverted politics that literally just, proliferate inside of this state. There's so much that the politicians do here behind closed doors and then lie to their constituents about. So it's not just hinged on me winning this seat. I'm not going to shut up anytime soon. So I do hope that I can win this seat, though, because that would allow me to have access at a higher level to be able to really work to improve the lives of Illinoisans and to advocate for them in a way that they have not been advocated for in a very long time.
I don't think that a lot of people really know that, they hear about Chicago and the crime and the gangs and all that. But Chicago is one of the most beautiful cities in the world, quite frankly.
Yes.
It's got arguably the best food on the planet. I miss the food desperately.
Yes.
And so I think that it's really worth saving.
It is.
And that's the thing is, here's this beautiful city. Here's all these amazing people. And yet here we are constantly just talking about the crime and this and that. Now, Chicago has a mayor, Brandon Johnson, who, in my opinion, is really over his head. He doesn't do a real good job advocating for his police department. He doesn't do a real good job of dealing with crime. No. What do you envision that we can do nationally when you get to Congress that will help that whole crime situation in Chicago and around the country?
So I think it's really going to come down to a congressperson being willing to kind of stand on business as it pertains to the reality of crime. What you see in Chicago and in Illinois is that they really have this like utopian view of how people would react if they had better homes and if they had better upbringings and all of these things. But at the end of the day, we're not protecting citizens because we want to handhold with criminals. I can't sit and say somebody who's already at the point of committing multiple gun violence related crimes or breaking and entering and all of those things. I have to focus on the people who are actually law-abiding citizens who need to be protected from this environment that literally allows crime to proliferate. So the things that I see here in Chicago right now is that they don't want to really crack down on repeat offenders. There's really not a lot of there's not a lot of support for cops to make sure that they can actually get the correct reports written so that they can actually keep these people behind bars once somebody is actually able to charge them. So what you see is that a lot of lawyers have figured out how to find loopholes in CPD reports. So if there's anything that's even a little bit off in the report, they're getting a gun charge thrown out, and they're having, people are getting a couple of days of time served, and that's all they're being held accountable for, and they're back on the streets to commit the same crime literally again. So those are things that I would want to work on, is making sure that if somebody is doing crimes and they're repeat offenders, or if they're a part of kind of like rackets, there's quite a few rackets that are going on in the state, and definitely in Chicago. You have people who will go and commit multiple retail theft crimes all throughout the city as a part of an organized crime. Like they're organizing and hitting the state and the city in multiple places and spaces, but nobody's really working to make sure that you can effectively charge all those people and take them all down at the same time. So my goal would be to make sure that I'm actually working to really clamp down on a lot of the crime that upticked massively as a result of COVID. The pandemic and the way that impacted the city and allowed for looting and robbing and all of those things, even carjacking. If you have a Nissan in Chicago, you know exactly how easy it is to have your car stolen. So all of those crimes have been allowed to become a part of the normal society. Like that's just normal to have your car stolen, or to have have a store just be broken into, and everybody comes in, takes all the merch, and just walks out casually. Those are things that need to be cracked down on much more aggressively. So making sure that I'm supporting the attorney general, making sure that I'm backing CPD and not having you where, it's all of these different rules and stipulations on, force and things of that nature. I'm not saying that anybody needs to be aggressively harmed above and beyond, but also a police officer is a police officer. And I'm not really clear on why we think that they should be treated like mall cops. They're not mall cops. They're police officers. There are levels to how the society is kept safe, and how these people are trained to be able to keep us safe as civilians. So I'm definitely not on the side of treating police officers like mall cops, because they're not. So when it comes down to them being able to do their job and do it effectively and efficiently, I want to make sure that I'm advocating for training as much as possible, but not on just things like on how to be more warm and fuzzy, but training on things that can really make them more efficient at identifying, like, hey, here's how you can we advocate for better reports, where when the DA or whoever gets this report, they're actually able to take everything inside of it and say, here's the charges and here's how we make them stick. We can't have all these loopholes inside of the system where these criminals and repeat offenders are just getting out over and over again. So obviously it's going to take a lot of research, a lot of conversations. I think that not enough conversations happen in Illinois. People stay in silos. Nobody wants to talk to anybody. You have Mayor Johnson, who doesn't like CPD, and you have all these, representatives and senators who think that you don't really need cops and defund the police. You need cops. You need the police funded. They need equipment. They need training. They need all the things they need to be able to do their job well. And that's what will allow them to really just, like I said, prosper in the state. But I would 100% be on the side of making sure that all the conversations are happening and we're not existing in silos, so we can address the needs of the community, because people are fed up with the crime. Like that's the reality. I don't care what Mayor Johnson says or Pritzker. People are fed up with crime, and they're exhausted with feeling like they're literally trapped inside of their homes and living in a state that's rotting at the core. So that just can't continue to be the case.
That is so well said. And I'm so glad you brought up police training, because it's not just about community policing and this and that. And very, very often Chicago police officers are outgunned. They're definitely outmanned. And then you brought up a really important point that I don't think we talk about enough. Courtroom preparation.
Yes.
That is so big, because when that case goes to the state's attorney, to the prosecutor, it needs to be absolutely airtight. And Chicago police officers are so short-staffed that I think you're absolutely right. They don't often get the chance to really prepare. Plus, they're dealing with so many homicides, shootings, armed robberies, really,
Mhm.
really violent crime. And you
Mhm.
also brought up another really good point that I
Mhm.
don't think people focus on enough. Most people in Chicago, like most people in most big cities,
Yeah.
are not criminals.
No.
It's a very tiny percentage of
Yes.
people that are committing all of these crimes. And
Mhm.
instead of giving them more programs and hugging them and
Yeah. Hand
all of
holding.
this, if we would incarcerate them and punish aberrant behavior, I
Mhm.
think that we would all be much better off. What say you?
Oh, I totally agree. I 100% agree. And it would really allow for people to invigorate the economy. When people feel safe, they go out and enjoy their community. They go invigorate the economy. They go hang out with their neighbors. They take walks. They do so many different things that improve their quality of life. And right now, you have crime happening in schools. It's happening in areas you never thought would happen on the Gold Coast. People getting shot in the Gold Coast. Like, these are not things that used to happen. Like, the crime is not just staying where it once stayed. So anybody who has the mindset of, oh, I just won't go to that side of the city, there is no side of the city where crime happens now. It happens everywhere. So you can't just sit back and keep allowing it.
Again, that is such a great point because it used to be back when I was a
Mhm.
young police officer, there were very
Mhm.
specific parts of the city that
Mhm.
you as a citizen just didn't visit. And
Yeah.
otherwise, you were relatively safe. But
Yeah.
really now, since 2020, since COVID and the George Floyd riots,
Mhm.
um, there really is no part of the city
No.
that is, quote unquote safe, which is really unfortunate. And you see a lot of like restaurants and businesses have closed,
Yep.
and that's very frustrating. I know that what
Mhm.
do small business owners tell you when it comes to your
Mhm.
district and what they want to see?
I've actually been analyzing what's going wrong with small businesses, because right now what you see is an excessive amount of commercial business space not rented and empty and vacant. The things that you currently see for small business owners right now is that they have an additional cost on top of having a small business, which is now they have to pay for security. So you have regular businesses like Potbelly. Why does Potbelly need a security officer? Why does a grocery store have to have a full security man, literally in like SWAT gear, watching multiple security screens in the front of a grocery store? That's not normal. That's very dystopian, and it speaks to a high level of dysfunction. So when you add on these additional costs to the profit margin of a business owner, they can't afford to pay a security guard to just sit there to make sure that nobody comes in and takes every bit of merchandise they have in the store. So it's causing them to just give up the battle of even being a business owner in Illinois, which will then make it where all you have left are these giant corporations that can't really connect to the actual needs of the consumer. I have no issues with giant corporations, but I love the charm and the attentiveness that small businesses bring to a community. That is the blood and the excitement and the connection that people need in order to feel like they live in Chicago. In my opinion, lately you haven't really felt like you live in Chicago much. A lot of that charm is literally leaving and bleeding out of the city, and also just bleeding out of the state. So small business owners need for crime to be pulled all the way back into check, because they cannot thrive this way. They're in fear. Their stores are being destroyed and their merchandise is being stolen.
And one of the things that, and you and I are like-minded on this,
Yeah.
is because Illinois is such an anti
Mhm.
Second Amendment state,
Yeah.
probably arguably one of the
Oh, yes.
absolute worst, probably the worst of the top three of the
Mhm.
worst for gun owners, and it continues
Yes.
to get worse
Yes.
every single year. Do you think that, for example, if business owners were able to
Mhm.
legally
Mhm.
arm themselves and people knew that they
Mhm.
could arm themselves legally, that would
Oh, yeah.
help crime in the city of Chicago and around the state?
I wholeheartedly think it would help. Here's the thing. Like I said, I lived for 4 years in Texas. And the one story we were chatting about before we started is, like I said, people don't honk their horns that much in Texas. You don't really hear car horns. And there's a reason for that. It's because people, when you have people who understand that they exist in a society where each man can protect and take care of themselves, and these people understand how to exist under those laws and those the environment that being armed creates, people have an additional deterrent. There are no real deterrents to crime in Illinois. I mean, people. For here's the thing: the criminals know that the cops' hands are tied. They know that the citizens' hands are tied, and a lot of citizens tie their own hands for some reason. But because they know that the citizen can't really protect themselves, and that CPD is going to have a really slow response time due to being short-staffed, and that when they even get there, they still have their hands tied because of all the rules and regulations around how they have to interact and all of that, it just makes it where criminals are not even motivated to hustle for a crime anymore. I literally watched, I was looking out of a window at my home. I watched three guys break into a container. They had chainsaws and everything, and they took their time. They were there for 15 minutes breaking into a construction container on a construction site. And they actually stole, we ended up finding out they stole about $10,000 worth of fridges from a construction site. I called CPD, they never came. And I don't blame CBD for not coming. I blame the city for not giving them the resources they need in order to be able to actually protect business owners, because a construction site is a business owner. Those were homeowners too who had their materials stolen from their future home. So I blame the city. I blame the city for not arming those police officers with the manpower they need, and then also giving them the bandwidth they need to do their job well. We all know if your hands are tied, even if you have a title, there's only so much you can do if somebody's literally tied your hands behind your back. So they're literally taking all the blame, but they have none of the material or real capability that they need to do their job well.
And you're the local politicians there, the governor
Mhm.
Pritzker, the mayor Johnson, and your
Mhm.
federal politicians as
Yeah.
well. All they talk about is
Mhm.
money. That we need,
Yes.
if we throw more money at this
More
problem,
money.
give people more money, and that really isn't the case, is it?
No, no, it's not. We're literally, money is being bled out in so many directions here in Illinois. It's extremely mismanaged. And then it all kind of continues to route back to the crime issue. So when you think about the way that Brandon is trying to fix the finances of Chicago, he thinks that if he keeps taxing and fining the law-abiding citizens, that he's going to make up the budget. Here's the thing, he's actually mismanaging the business of Chicago. Chicago is such an amazing entity from a business standpoint. If you're able to monetize it correctly, where you're incentivizing events to come back to the city because it's safe, you're incentivizing businesses to come back to the city because it's safe, you're incentivizing citizens to come shop in the city and come hang out in the city because it's safe, it causes people to then want to infuse the economy here in Chicago. But as of right now, none of those things stand true. Chicago is not safe. And because it's not safe, Chicago is broke. So it's literally just a catch 22 because he won't fix crime. It's destroying so much.
You're so right, because we say this often: people who
Mhm.
don't feel safe aren't free. and
No.
and, and you alluded to that earlier. If you don't
Mhm.
feel safe enough to go down to the corner store, you don't feel safe
No.
enough to take guests from out of town down to the Magnificent Mile, or to a
Mhm.
restaurant or whatever it is. You're not going to be financially supporting your community. In fact, you're going to be sitting in your condo or your house, and you're going to be ordering from Amazon, and that's it. And you're going to go out to the suburbs to do your shopping. And do you think that, again, you came from,
Mhm.
you were in Texas, you experienced that. I live in Arizona, where we're a completely constitutional carry
Mhm.
state. Do you think, if Illinois, and I want people to understand the firearm regulations in Illinois, you can't even own a firearm unless you have passed a background check by the Illinois State Police
Mhm.
and possess something called a firearm owner's identification card. Then to get a concealed carry permit, which we have only had since 2013 in Illinois. We were the last state to get citizen carry. You have to go through some extraordinary regulations to be able to carry that firearm. If some of that was loosened up, what do you envision for Illinois and for Congressional District 1, where you live, and the city of Chicago?
I think that if you were able to loosen up those regulations and allow for law abiding citizens to be able to protect and to arm themselves, I think you would see a decrease in carjackings. I think you would see a decrease in breaking and entering in people's homes. I also think you would see a decrease in theft in retail environments, because if people knew that if you were in a grocery store and you could reasonably assume that 70% of the people are carrying, I think it changes your mindset towards stealing and things of that nature. Not that somebody's going to just take it upon themselves to gun somebody down per se, but also when you know that everybody, more than likely, even the mom with her toddler is carrying, it just changes the mindset. And it makes it where somebody really has to come extremely prepared to do some of these crimes, because anybody could then be a part of creating a law abiding situation. And it also, here's the thing, when citizens know that they're armed, they're more likely to maybe engage with somebody who's trying to rob somebody. They're more likely to stop somebody from doing a crime because they know that they're capable of protecting themselves. Most people who own weapons, they don't just own them and they're not just lazy about it. People who own weapons typically will go and practice with their weapons. They're learning about the actual laws that are, that surround being a responsible gun owner. They're not just sitting here, having a gun and shooting it in the air. That's not how, concealed carry people operate, or people who, want to, really exercise their Second Amendment right. They actually are responsible citizens for the most part. Like, it's just the whole misnomer that people who have concealed carry are more dangerous. Like, that's a 100% false narrative. Here's the thing, all these gun regulations, they do not stop criminals from getting illegal guns. It does not stop them. They don't go buy them at the normal stores and get them off of the black market. They're not going to Shields or to, any of these large, sports goods stores. They're literally going and getting black market guns or getting them from pawn shops and all of that. But law abiding citizens, they need to be able to take care of themselves, because that's their right. It's why we have our Constitution. We shouldn't have to keep arguing that.
And we used to hear from Lori Lightfoot that all the illegal guns in Chicago came from Indiana, which was
Oh,
again another completely false narrative. And
yes.
the thing is, and I have seen this for
Mhm,
decades as a law enforcement officer and now
mhm,
as a law enforcement trainer, people who do get arrested, especially in Cook County and in Chicago,
mhm,
for illegal firearms,
mhm.
criminals, you
Yeah.
you said exactly this. They tend to have multiple criminal records. They tend to have lengthy rap sheets, and absolutely nothing happens to them. They
No.
might either charges get dropped, they get pled down, they leave the court, they leave gun court. People don't even understand what gun court is in Cook County.
Mhm.
But they leave gun court with an ankle monitor on, which they cut off in 2 weeks, and really nothing ever happens to them. So this proliferation of illegal firearms is never tamped down, and crime just continues.
Yeah. No, there's too many areas of crime in Illinois and especially in Chicago that are just not being addressed all at the same time. And like I said, it's just causing the city to decay. You can't have it where the moment the sun goes down, I live in Woodlawn. The moment the sun goes down, you start hearing gunshots, you hear sirens. It just sounds like you're like in a third world country.
And
And I think,
Woodlawn is a nice neighborhood.
yeah, it's actually a nice area. Like there's $1 million homes by me. Like literally, there's $1 million home right next to me. I'm like, how is it? How is that okay? It's couldn't possibly be okay. There are schools over here and everything, and this is the area that people live in and reside in. And you have Brandon Johnson putting signs on the sidewalk talking about he's building back better or something of that nature, whatever his little weird slogan is. I'm like, you're not building anything right now. You're only destroying.
You know, we have had
Mhm,
street gangs in Chicago. I
mhm,
mean, of course, we had the mob in the 40s and all
yeah,
that, the 20s to the 40s. And then
mhm,
really from the 70s on, street gangs in
mhm,
Chicago were infamous for that,
yeah.
right? What do you envision being able to do, again, on the federal level, because you are running for Congress, to be
Mhm.
able to help law enforcement finally get a handle on the street gang problem in Chicago and in Illinois?
So my strategy overall is always going to be to really look at it at all of these situations from a common sense perspective. I think that if we had less politicians who are trying to appeal to criminals and more so trying to appeal to, again, law-abiding citizens, and then the actual people who protect those law-abiding citizens, those two groups will always be my priority, because that's who should be any politician's priority. I'm never going to create any type of legislation that would favor a criminal or make it harder for either police officers to arrest and detain, or for actual attorneys and things at the state level to be able to actually convict. I want people to get arrested. I want them to get convicted, and I want them to actually serve the time that they should serve based on the law they broke. Here's the thing. Most people know that you cannot shoot at a cop. That is a common sense thing. If you decide to shoot at a cop, there is a consequence. And at this given point in time, we've created this environment where people don't ever think that they should suffer consequences. That is how life works. We need to reintroduce natural consequences. If you do something very bad, there is a very bad consequence. You can choose to never do that again and live a good life after that, but you did a very bad thing. And now you need to serve that very bad consequence. And I would never create any legislation or support or vote for any legislation that would make it harder for that ecosystem to thrive. So we shouldn't have, I think that right now Cook County isn't even really at capacity. It's like there's more than enough people to be inside of Cook County right now based on the types of crimes that are happening all over the city. So I'm not, like I said, I'm never going to support that. I would never advocate for it. I would never vote for any type of legislation like that. And I would really want to work to introduce legislation that makes it where it is much easier to convict and to make sure that people are serving time for the crimes they committed. I want people to be, to make sure that people are held accountable to making sure they're being very thorough with their work. I would support that. Be thorough, make sure that you're actually, you know, not having too many preconceived notions. One thing I will say is that the idea that they don't allow police to, what is it, the phrase that they don't want you to do?
Stop and frisk.
Yeah, stop and frisk, or, you know, doing things where you're just assuming somebody is a criminal. I think that that's a very I don't agree with, you know, stop and frisk or anything of that nature, but allowing police to be able to say, hey, there is a profile. I don't want to condone profiling, but if there is a group that you're seeing a bigger high uptick, even if it's like in age or if it's in an area where citizens are saying like, hey, we're really having a tough time, like my catalytic converter got taken on my car and so did 3 of my neighbors. You know, like, okay, let's make sure that we're actually able to go into these areas and have a strategy. If you're not allowed to create a document that says here is the type of person or here's the type of crime that's happening, how can you then build a strategy? So
that's database policing.
Yeah, thank you. Let's just call it database policing. That's what I want to. We need to have more of that. Like, if you cannot analyze data and make decisions based off of data and then build strategies off of data, how can you actually address crime? You can't.
Yeah. So, Christian Maxwell, we need like 50 more of you in Congress. And and I, you know, because you're speaking common sense and you're speaking it from a perspective of experience, which I think is huge. Just as a homeowner, as a mom, as a wife, that those are the people that that I believe are gonna save this nation. So you know, we are so grateful that you were able to take some time and spend time with us. And let me just say this: when you're super famous in a couple of months, I'm gonna say I interviewed you first. So you know. You speak, you know, literally truth to power, and we're so grateful that you spent some time with us today. Thanks again. Tell people where they can find you on social media, your website, all of that.
So my website is christianmaxwellforcongress.com. And then my biggest platform is on TikTok. My name on there is the Mod Pun. It stands for the Modern Pundit. I do a lot of really common sense takes. I share all of my ideas about how America should kind of function, what is common sense as it pertains to crime, education, and a variety of topics. So if you want to get to know how I thoroughly feel about that, I have hundreds of videos that you can watch to really get to know me. I don't hold any punches. I tell people all the time that I would rather be not be elected because you know exactly how I feel about things than to hide how I feel and get elected and then you're confused because you didn't know my viewpoint. So I'm very transparent. That's just how I function. And you can follow me on the Mod Pun at TikTok to actually get to know me better. And then you'll be able to easily find all my links from there.
All right. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today. And if you'd like more information about the National Police Association, you can visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Every day, the brave men and women of law enforcement put their lives on the line to keep us safe. But they need our help to continue their mission. Activist politicians, progressive prosecutors, the ACLU, and the rest of the anti-police forces receive millions in donations from extremist pro-criminal elements like George Soros and woke corporations. The National Police Association is fighting them in courts around the country, including the United States Supreme Court, defending officers who are being attacked for doing their jobs. Additionally, the National Police Association works year-round to pass tough-on-crime legislation to put and keep criminals behind bars. Consider going to nationalpolice.org and donating to keep us in the fight. Together we can win. That is nationalpolice.org.